In houses in many places across the world today, children are waking up with an extreme sense of excitement, just like our kids woke up on Christmas morning, because for them it is their Christmas morning. It is the day that the wise men came, the Magi came. It is the day that they will have their Christmas, that they will receive their gifts. And it is a day of great excitement and a day of great celebration in many, many cultures. And they will be just every bit of excitement, and there will be as much celebration. And although my daddy had always explained that to me, had told me stories about how when he was a little boy, he'd wake up and there'd be a stocking filled with his own oranges and his own almonds, which always seemed odd to me because he grew up on an almond and olive orchard, but they would be his own, and that was so special. It wasn't until I visited Cuba and I got to experience the Feast of the Epiphany for myself in a foreign land that I really understood that it was Christmas on steroids. It was like Cinco de Mayo and every fiesta I had ever experienced to the 100th millionth degree. We were in church in the morning for almost 4 hours, and it was worship personified and glorious and happy. And then we went to church at night for a wonderful, wonderful pageant that went on for about 3 hours, and there was more color and more beads and more sequins and more glitter everywhere. You know, my heart was just joyous. And banners and dancing and singing and pageantry and the whole story. Because for them, the beginning of the whole pageantry of the angel coming to Mary and telling the whole story, and the angel going to Joseph in living color and all the parts, and Elizabeth and Zechariah and then all of the parts of the story of the travel and throwing in La Posada, so you were knocking on every door throughout the entire sanctuary, and then coming to the stable and the shepherds and all the animals, but then the wise men coming. Oh, how they came in grandeur with live animals, and a couple little accidents. But oh, how they came with grandeur, and the excitement of the children because they got little candies, and the singing, and the joy, and the excitement, and everybody was up dancing and clapping and participating, and although it got to be pretty late at night, it didn't seem like anyone, no matter how little they were or how old they were, and no one seemed to be tired, and we all enjoyed it, and all I kept thinking is, I finally have gotten it, because after all the stories I had already begun to hear, and I would continue to hear over the next several weeks about what they had experienced prior to becoming Christian. Most of the people I were getting to know were new Christians. They had lived in this darkness of life without God. And all it seemed was sadness and oppression and poverty and unhappiness and emptiness and just day after day of despair. And then there was the Bible and God's Word and Jesus, and He had come to save them, and there was light, and there was happiness, and there was joy, and there was promise, and there was hope. And so the Advent had taken on this whole season of anticipation also on steroids. Like there was just this waiting, and there was this hoping, and this preparation, and there was this constant working. And it was so like when they were preparing for the pageant, it wasn't just like the children were going to rehearsals. It was like whole family systems were getting ready, and the grandmas were baking, and the aunts and the uncles were, everybody was engaged in the work because everyone was getting ready for this great event. And when they celebrated that night, The whole community was celebrating, and it truly poured out onto the street when it was all over. Our season of Advent is over. And during our season of Advent, there were some people who seemed to just kind of gloss over it because their lives are okay, and life is, joyous, and they have what they need, and they have what they want, and it's kind of comfortable. But for many, their life seems to be in a darkness. There's grief, and there's heartache, and there's brokenness. And they don't seem to have much hope of its changing. And I think that there is a lot of correlation to what it was like in the time of the Roman domination before Jesus was born. Because for many people, the people that were ruled over in that time, there was all darkness. But for the Jewish people in that time, even though life was very, very hard, there was hope. Because the prophets gave them a word of hope. That there was a light that was coming. That there was a Messiah who would come one day and bring light into the darkness. That there was a promise that one day that their fields would bring fruit to them again. And their trees wouldn't be barren, and their lives would be filled again. And one would come to save them, and it would not be over. Their lives would one day be full and rich again. And so in the midst of the oppression of the Roman government, in which there was 3% of the people had 97% of the wealth, there was hope amongst the Jewish people, where all the rest of the people were pretty sad. And the early Christians, when they came to understand who Jesus was, were so filled with the delight that they were bearers of that hope come to fruition. And so not only were they the ones who recognized Jesus as the light who had come into the world, they recognized that what Isaiah had said, I'm going to find it, it's going to come. My eyes are going to land on it. In chapter 40, verse 5, the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the people shall see it together. That he made a point of saying that all the people shall see it together, because from the minute that Jesus was born, it wasn't just about the Jewish people. The promises had been shared with the Jewish people, that the prophets had spoken to the Jewish people, that God was going to bring light, and God was going to bring goodness, and God was going to bring hope, and one would come, a Messiah would come. But all along, God was saying through the prophets that all people would be recipients of the light. All people would be given the hope and the freedom. And that was abundantly clear from the moment of his birth, that the shepherds would come, the lowliest of the low, the poorest of the poor would come, and the angels would spread the good news to everybody. And the people who came, those wise men who came, were not people that the Jewish people had raised according to the law and the structure of what was proper. These were heathen Gentiles, and who had come because they had had a dream, and they had been informed by the stars in the heavens, and they came to worship the newborn King of the Jews, because God had made a promise that God would bring light into the world for all people, because we have a God who cares about people everywhere. And that word is a word that God was sending to the people of Israel to share with all of the people. And that's why the evangelist Paul was so excited that he was called to be the evangelist to all people. He thought, oh my goodness, some of the disciples, they got to be evangelists to the Jews, and that was a hard job. because they were trying to convert them over to this kind of rebel guy who had died on a cross. But he was getting to go out to the Gentiles and tell them the good news. Hey, what? This is for everybody. That I've got good news that someone had come into the world to save us all. And Paul wanted to be the bearer of that light, that good news, to shed in all the places that there was darkness, because there was darkness in many places across the world, like there is darkness in many places across the world today. But Epiphany, the revealing of God's light, the tearing away of what veils our ability to see, is something that Christians own. We own the ability to see what God is showing to us. God made known to us God's great love. And God made known to us God's great love through the manifestation of a baby born in human form, who was Christ the King. God enfleshed, laid in a manger, so that we might have life, eternal. So that we would no longer have to worry about what's going to happen. Is God going to care for us? Is God going to love us? Is God going to forgive us? Because God made it real for us. God showed us God's love in the birth of God's Son. I would like to pray this prayer with you, and it is from Newell's Praying with the Earth. May the angels of light glisten for us this day. May the sparks of God's beauty dance in the eyes of those we love. May the universe be on fire with presents for us this day. May the new suns rising grace us with gratitude. Let earth's greenness shine and its waters writhe with spirit. Let heaven's wind stir the soil of our soul and fresh awakenings arise within us. May the mighty angels of light glisten in all things this day. May they summon us to reverence, and may they call us to life. I was struck by Chris's challenge last week. And I invite us to continue to be challenged by the God of surprises. May we be open to the surprises that God will do in and through us in 2019. God is preparing to do a mighty work through this faith community. God has been working in and through us, the work we did with the Faith Build for Habitat for Humanity. Hopefully the work that we do through this neighboring project, where we learn to be good neighbors to one another and to our community. The work that we will do in understanding how to be better neighbors to each other through Forks in Fellowship, as we continue to delve into God's Word, as we continue Bible study, and as we continue to raise God's children to become followers of Jesus Christ. May all the glory be to God. Amen.